This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything.
The MeatEater podcast is brought to you by First Light. Whether you're checking trail cams, hanging deer stands, or scouting for elk, First Light has performance apparel to support every hunter in every environment. Check it out at firstlight.com. FIRSTLITE.com. Turn the machine on, Phil.
We're on.
We'll start the show. Yeah. I was all fired up. Yanni just put one of those little magnifying lenses in his thing.
Yeah.
Because your pins get blurry.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
I went from
okay,
having 2 pins to, well, I still have 2 pins, but I was seeing 4.
Yeah, you're going to want to take it right back out. Here's what you're going to want to do. I went down that whole path. Okay?
And this is in the peep sight.
Yeah. So when you start getting old man vision, okay, and you need reading glasses, your pin, when you're shooting archery, your pin gets blurry. And so, it starts to affect your accuracy. So then you go down and get one of them little, what's they called?
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
Gosh darn it.
Clarifier, whatever the hell.
Yeah.
And you put it in, you can get different magnifications, right? And you look and you're like, it's like the heavens have opened. And there's your pin in all of its glory.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is my experience to a T.
Okay.
So far.
And you think this is the greatest thing in the world. I'm going to start just, Robin Hooding all my arrows. Then what's going to happen? You're going to wind up in Hawaii, right? It's going to be getting dark. Okay. You're looking in that thick vegetation, and here comes a black hog.
I think I was there for this.
You're going to pull back, and you're not even going to be able to see the hog. The hog will cease to exist. And you'd be like, what happened? And you let down, and you look, and there he is. And then you draw back. How's he keep doing that? And you let down, look, he's still there. And you draw back. That's what's going to happen to you, my friend. Joined today by world-renowned musky fisherman, guide, author, someone who's devoted his life to musky history, Larry Ramsell. Ramsell, what do you like, Larry? Ramsell.
Yep.
Fresh out of Wisconsin. We had a number of episodes recently where we brought up controversies surrounding the muskellunge. How do you like to say it?
That's proper.
Okay.
Yeah. We call them muskies, of course, but
Yep.
the proper name is muskellunge.
A lot of controversies around muskies.
Oh, boy.
People being like, I caught the real world record, but they won't accept it.
Yeah.
And we kept saying, and I said, we should find a certified real muskie expert. A number of people wrote in saying, if you were going to talk to the real muskie expert, the man at the end of the line.
Well, let's hope.
That's a turn of phrase.
It'd be Larry. I just made that up.
It's good.
It'd be Larry Ramsell.
Should write that down.
Yeah, I may not know what questions you're going to ask, but I'll know the answer to at least 95% of them.
Here's one. I bet you know the answer to this. How'd you wind up getting into muskies? How'd you become a muskie fanatic? And are you part of the muskie community?
Yes, I am. I'm in it up to my ears. My dad started with the neighbor, caught a nice fish, and that opened the door, and away we went.
At what age?
I was probably 7 or 8 when he started catching them, but I caught my first legal one when I was 13 and been at it for 3 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
You guys probably ate them back then, huh?
Ate every one of them.
Yeah. Can I tell you like an apocryphal family story, and you can tell me if you've ever heard of this?
Okay.
Perhaps apocryphal family story. My maternal grandfather was a muskie fisherman.
I heard that on your podcast, yeah.
He likes to talk about they would harness rig a chipmunk.
Yep.
And put it on a board out in a pond.
Yeah.
And then you paddle the shore and pull the chipmunk off the board with your rod.
Yeah.
And then let it swim around out there. Is that a true muskie fishing technique of days gone by?
Possibly.
Okay.
But you can substitute squirrels, cats, anything that's...
So you've heard these stories?
Oh, yes.
Have you witnessed some of these stories?
No, not that one.
Okay. So I can keep telling that story.
It would likely work.
Okay. I'm going to keep telling that story.
But
where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Illinois, and we fished always in Wisconsin, Hayward area.
Okay.
So started when I was knee-high to a grasshopper and still at it. Live 3 miles outside of town and go to Canada to catch muskies.
You don't fish Wisconsin much.
Not much.
Yeah.
I fished half a day last week, but I fished 3 weeks a year in Canada. That's where the big ones are.
Got it. If you had to define the muskie community, what would you say it is? Like, why is the muskie community different than other fishing communities?
Well, they're a very dedicated lot, and they're all very conservation-oriented, wanting to preserve the species.
Got it.
The way the sport has increased in the last 50 years, had there not been catch and release come into vogue, there wouldn't be any left.
You think so?
Absolutely guaranteed.
They'd have fried them all.
They would have fried them all. Yeah,
You think so?
yeah. It takes them 5 to 6 years before they spawn, and they're not very productive at that rate. And then they'll live to 20 to 30 years old. And it takes a long time for them to get there, and they're too valuable to catch just once. There's legions of stories of the same fish being caught multiple times due to catch and release, which takes the pressure off the fishery and shows that catch and release does work if they're properly handled.
When was the last time you ate one?
Oh, it's been quite a while. I can't even remember the taste, but I will tell you they were good.
Yeah.
What was the favorite preparation back then?
My dad liked to skin them and then have Mom bake them in a whole piece. In fact, I had my wife do one time. I left the head on, and she put an apple in the mouth, the whole...
Seriously?
Yeah, I got a picture. It's pretty cool looking.
How long you been married?
Which time?
Oh, first time.
First time was 10 years. The second time was 17. The third time was, I don't know, 3 or 4,
What do you think goes wrong?
Well, so
Is it too much fishing?
probably.
Just give it a cumulative number then. Just say 41.
Well, I've been living with the gal I live with now for 15 years, but we're not married. So
You gave up on
that's the
that. You
key.
gave up on that whole scene,
yeah,
huh?
it's working out better this way.
Has fishing torn you apart in your relationships?
I think there was a lot more to it than just fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably spent money I didn't have to spend chasing fish, but
Yeah, I got you.
I should say muskies are the only thing I fish for
Well, at what point were you just all muskies all the time?
right off the bat.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, I'd try to catch a walleye off the dock, for something to do. But when it was time to get in the boat, it was musky rod only.
Yeah. How many states you fish muskies in?
22 states and 2 provinces of Canada.
Okay. How many states are they from?
Right now, there's 38 states that have muskies or tiger muskies.
No. I mean, where is the fish native to, and where all has it been spread to?
The upper Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, the Ohio River system, through down into Kentucky. There's muskies in Tennessee. They did at one time range as far as northern Alabama, native, but they're not there anymore.
Okay.
And then, people started catching them, and such pressure got on the fisheries that the DNR, for instance, in Wisconsin, had to build 2 of the world's finest muskie hatcheries just to keep up with the harvest of 100,000 muskies a year. And it couldn't keep up with it. So that's why catch and release, you called it 2.0. It's been 2.0 since the late 70s. That's when the muskie...
That's
when catch and release took hold.
But way before other fisheries.
Yeah. And what happened early on, I analyzed it in reverse. They did it wrong. As people got into catch and release, they let the little ones go and kept the big ones. Well, it should be just the opposite. And that's why now the trophy waters, like, for instance, in Ontario, when I first started fishing there, the size limit was 28 inches a day, 2 fish per day.
Where was that again?
In Ontario.
Okay.
In the 80s,
tell me the size limit again.
Pardon me?
In Ontario, it
was 28 inches, 2 a day.
Okay. Minimum size, 28 inches.
Right.
I got you.
Then after some studies were done, and they found out that there was 2 different strains of fish, and we'll get into that probably in a little bit too, but there are lakes that grow big fish and lakes that never grow big fish. So Ontario picked out their trophy lakes, the ones that had the potential to grow big fish, and put a 54-inch size limit on them. Quite a change.
That's a hell of a jump.
Yeah, quite a change from 28.
I remember everybody's worked up when I was a kid and they moved northerns from 21 to 24. You'd have thought they'd You know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's, my dad never released a muskie in his life. In fact, he netted one once that I released. That's
Because he wanted it back in the boat?
He wanted to eat it. That was just, that was the mode that he grew up fishing muskies in, and I couldn't convince him that catch and release was a good idea. So
Larry, what's the difference between like a big fish lake and a small fish lake? Is it forage or?
that's part of it, but the biggest thing is genetics.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah. You think so?
absolutely, but let me also clarify that
I don't know if I buy that, Larry.
there are two different fish.
Okay.
Dr. LeBeau tries to say they're two different species. The fishery world isn't buying that, but yet they kind of buy it when they went to a 54-inch size limit for the trophy lakes.
Well,
But the lakes, here's how it works. The lakes that's always had muskies but never had pike are called allopatric. Those populations spawn once and have no competition from pike, so they don't grow big. Waters like the St. Lawrence River and the Georgian Bay and Lake Huron, Lake St. Clair, those waters have always had pike in them. That's called sympatric. So those fish have the potential to grow big, and they've evolved a different strategy for spawning. They spawn in deeper water than the muskies in the muskies-only lakes, and they spawn twice. That's because they broadcast their eggs. They don't guard them. They don't, like the northern pike, when they spawn, their eggs will stick to weeds, keep them out of the muck in the bottom of the lake. Well, muskies, they just dump their spawn in, and wherever it goes, that's where it goes. So that's why their reproductive percentage is very, very small. And that's why the stocking, where there's any kind of pressure at all, is necessary to keep the fisheries going, even if it's a native lake, let alone one that started out of being a stocked lake.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of the fish that evolved with pike evolved to do things different and grow bigger. For instance, most of the early studies that were done on eggs in muskies were anywhere from 100,000 to 250,000 with a big mature female, using that term loosely. But what we found was that the bigger fish in the sympatric waters, like Eagle Lake or Georgian Bay or St. Lawrence River, they spawn twice, and they can have up to 850,000 eggs.
Okay.
And they have to spawn twice because they can only mature 50% of the eggs in the first go-around, and then they dump that, and then a week to 10 days, 2 weeks later, the rest of the eggs mature, and they spawn a second time. And the second spawn is equally as important as the first spawn.
Now, this is, sorry to interrupt, but twice annually or twice in a lifetime?
Twice in the spring.
Okay, so twice annually.
Every spring.
Okay.
Yeah. And they spawn till they get right up to the end. I mean, if they're 30 years old, they're still spawning. A lot of people think that as they get old, their eggs aren't, they don't spawn anymore, or the eggs aren't any good, they're not viable. But that's not true. They do very well right up till they die. So.
What I want to get into the whole record book question, but I want to lay out a little more biology for people first. Sure. How can someone, when you said that someone argues it's two species, I mean, how could that possibly be true?
Well, the scientists.
I mean, but they're not like. Are they saying they're genetically separate and wouldn't be able to reproduce?
Well, here's the thing. Back in the mid-1900s, biologists tentatively agreed to agree that there were three subspecies of muskies.
Okay.
There was one muskie, but three subspecies.
Yep.
So they went with that for a long time. And then when it was discovered that we had allopatric fish and sympatric populations that were totally different and grew differently and spawned differently, then they changed their thinking. When Dr. LeBeau did his doctoral thesis, which I worked with for the whole summer of 1986 on Eagle Lake and Wabagoon Lake in northwestern Ontario, his hypothesis was that there are two distinct species of muskies.
Okay.
One being the smaller strain, or the smaller population, the allopatric fish, and the big ones being the sympatric populations, the big water fish.
Yep. So when musky guys are saying that some lake has some strain, what are they talking about? Or they probably some strain in there.
But
are the fisheries producing these world-class hatcheries that you're talking about, rather, are they producing a particular strain of muskie?
They have just graduated to that. Now their big thing today is genetic preservation. In other words, this lake is genetically different than this lake, then you don't mix them up.
Okay.
For over 100 years, Wisconsin raised fish in their hatcheries, stocked them wherever. In fact, in the early days, they put them on a train. At every whistle stop, if you wanted some muskies for your lake, you meet them with your horse and buggy, load them on your wagon, and away you go, and nobody knows where they went. So that's why there's no way today that they can define which lakes were native musky lakes, except the ones that are connected to the river systems.
Gotcha.
So
They kind of lost track of the fish for a while.
But they didn't even try to keep track. It was 1933 before the Wisconsin DNR even started keeping stocking records. So everything that happened from 1900 to 1933, nobody knows. And of course, everybody's long gone now, so there's no records anywhere of what was done. And they did that up until 2006. We started a battle with the DNR about we wanted bigger strain of fish. We wanted the Mississippi River strain, which grow big and they grow big fast. For instance, they have been documented to grow up to 54 inches and 38 pounds in 10 years.
The Mississippi fish.
The Mississippi River strain. These came out of Leech Lake in Minnesota, which is connected to the Mississippi River. So that's,
When you say we, Wisconsinites?
Yeah, we were trying to get the DNR to quit getting muskies from wherever the hell they wanted to get them and mix them all up and stock them because they didn't grow. And we proved that when we started the fight. They hired a geneticist from the University of Wisconsin. And what they had done is over 50 years, they had created a lake. It's called Bone Lake in western Wisconsin. It was not a native musky lake. So for 50 years, they mixed whatever in there. And when we made an issue of it, the geneticist said that what they probably have done is created a hatchery strain of fish.
Yeah.
In other words, they'd take the eggs from there, raise them in a hatchery, and put them back in there, plus stock from wherever they were getting their eggs from.
Yeah.
And he proved that that's exactly what they did. So he shut them off from ever using that lake again for eggs.
Got it.
So if you go to the Spooner Hatchery in Spooner, Wisconsin, they've got a area where you walk into and you look down into the hatchery floor. And around the windows, they've got pictures. In one of the pictures, they show them taking eggs from a 28-incher. The geneticist said that's fine because you need to have diversity. But what you don't know, particularly when you've been mixing stocks for over 100 years, is where they came from, what are their genetics, do they have the capability to grow big, which they didn't. And so that's why we were wanting to change strains, because the anglers want fish that grow fast and grow big. And because they grow fast, they're very aggressive and they hit lures a lot easier than fish that are, 15, 20 years old and they're this big.
But are these guys chasing? Are they just chasing because they want big fish, or are they chasing some thing like when you go back in the historic record, you go back to the late 1800s, you go back to the early 1900s? Is there something to suggest that back then there was a bunch of giant muskies running around?
No, but every time a giant muskie was caught, it made big news.
Okay,
and so that's what musky fishermen fed on. And there's different stages. The newcomers, they're happy to catch a 30-incher just to say they caught a muskie. But as you progress in the sport, as you learn more, you learn how to fish better, you go to lakes that have bigger fish, naturally you always want to catch more and more and more, bigger, bigger, bigger. And that's what...
I'm struggling to phrase a question I'm trying to ask here. Is it muskie conservation, or is it just wanting big muskies no matter how you get them?
It's a combination.
Okay.
But here's the thing. There are some lakes that will never produce a fish over 35 pounds. More than likely, it's an allopatric lake, although I've got an example of a sympatric lake that's in that position. But so, for instance, I used to tell people in my seminars, if your lake record where you're fishing is 35 pounds, guess what? You're never going to catch a world record there because it doesn't exist. That strain of fish, that genetic pool doesn't have the potential to get big.
I don't know if you're familiar with the work of what's Kaufman's first name?
Carl?
Kevin Monteith and
Oh.
Matt.
Matt
There you go.
Kaufman.
Where's he from?
Well, they work on mule deer.
Oh,
They work on ungulates.
no, I'm not familiar.
Well, I don't know that this is applicable, but they've gone in on a totally different thing. Not even apples and oranges. It's farther apart than apples and oranges.
Okay,
Maybe.
maybe.
Far apart. It's muskies and mule deer. M words. So they share M's. But here's the thing. They go into all these areas, like in their research, they go into these areas where it's like, oh, it's genetics. Okay? These deer don't have the right genetics. They're never going to grow big. They don't have the right genetics. You can take those deer in the areas that have the no good genetics and you move them to a new place. Guess what? Wasn't genetics. It was
Food.
well, yeah, but not just food for you. It was food for your mother. Meaning when a
gotcha.
deer hits the ground, his fate is sealed. When he hits the ground, like you could tell a lot about his potential antler growth already because it was like, what was his in utero nutrition like?
Right.
But I'm not getting into that with fish. I'm just saying like all this, and I don't know if this is even applicable in fish, but all this idea of like certain areas and certain counties having genetics is it could be such a much more complex picture.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That it's all these hidden factors, and that you could take those fish and move them to the lake that has good genetics and somehow monitor them and make it that they can't intermingle, and all of a sudden you might realize that it wasn't genetics, it was whatever the hell. Stress,
Let me give you
pressures.
one example of the sympatric population that I have in mind. I've got some friends that fish there religiously, and they're very good fishermen, and they've caught over 900 fish. But they've never caught a 50-incher, even though they're the population of fish that you would think has the potential to grow big.
Mm-hmm.
But they're in a lake with pike,
Okay.
but there's so few spawning areas for the pike that the muskies control them quite easily. And so it's a what we call a trout lake. It's a deep, clear, and they
Okay.
feed mostly on trout and probably small pike, but they just haven't evolved a need to get any bigger
Yep.
because the pike don't get big. I mean, they catch a nice one every once in a while, but most of them are, hammer handles.
Yeah.
So that's a sympatric situation that if they were put someplace else, like a bigger water, if they were moved to the St. Lawrence River or Georgian Bay, they probably would continue to get bigger.
Mm-hmm.
They would have that potential. But because of the situation of where they're at, the forage, the cold water, the not having a need to get bigger,
Yeah.
they just have stopped at about almost 50 inches.
They're keeping in line with their surroundings and
and
ecosystem
their needs. Right.
versus being in a bigger ecosystem. They could grow all they want and never outpace that ecosystem.
Right. Right.
Your girlfriend now, does she like to fish muskies?
No. Bluegills with a bobber. Worms.
Oh, I'll go with her, man. I'm gonna steal your girlfriend, Larry. Where right now are the real big ones? Like, who's gonna catch the next record? Or is it too late? They'll never catch a new record.
Well, Lac Seul has the potential.
What's that?
Since that's what started this whole thing, getting me involved here, Lac Seul was where that 72-pounder came from.
Yep.
72.2 is what they called it officially. But that lake, and you probably didn't know this, is catch and immediate release only. Can't keep anything there.
Okay. Tell us where this lake is.
It's in northwestern Ontario
Okay.
or northern Ontario. It's getting towards the northern part of the Musky Range.
And is it a big river
It's a
chain?
big reservoir.
Oh, big reservoir.
It's a dammed river system.
Yep.
And
It's got
so
some studs in it.
It's got some big fish. Now, there's never been weighed that I'm aware of any over 60 pounds, but there's been a lot of 60-inch class fish, long fish. In fact, I guided a friend of mine's son to a 57-incher there. So they get long. They just don't get 70 pounds. Sorry. But,
Yeah. What do you think is the max they can get? Like,
Well-
I'm talking like gill netted, found dead on the beach, whatever.
all right. There's never been one hung on a scale that weighed more than the world records, the former world records. But I'm of the belief, 95%, that most of them are bogus.
Hmm.
Can I read this to you?
Please,
This kind
yeah.
of covers a ton of stuff. This is written by Gord Pizer, who used to be the fisheries managers for the Lake of the Woods area, Kenora, Ontario.
Okay.
And he's on my modern day muskie world record committee.
Okay.
And he talks about in here Dr. John Castleman, who your friend Patrick Durkin wrote about in that,
Yep.
that thing he did. And Dr. Castleman is also on my committee, and he's acknowledged as the foremost muskie scientist on the planet.
Got it.
Okay. If we could reduce the handling mortality of big muskies by only 4%, we would increase the muskie population by a staggering 70%. Think about
What?
that. Think about that. Now,
I am.
he'll explain a little more.
Oh, he better.
Crossman and Castleman. Crossman was Castleman's teacher. We're also able to show that the benefits of returning large muskies unharmed to the water resulted in an increase in the mean length of the fish, which was precisely the news that muskie anglers wanted to hear. But the Callaghan study, that's this bone here, this is what they use now to age how old a muskie is.
Yep.
They used to use scales, but after age 10, the edges wear off and they weren't accurate.
Got it.
So that's why they went to this. It calculated mortality rates, musculin's mortality rates, and compared them to the maximum age to see if the age of the trophy fish had changed over time. And they found that the maximum age of muskies may be decreasing. In fact, they believe that the maximum age of the fish may have decreased by 2 years from 23 to 21 years of age during the study period. Now, the difference of a couple of years may not sound significant, but remember that the fish spawn throughout their lives. The biggest muskie lay more eggs than the smaller fish, and that the mammoth musclines nearly always result from the very largest year classes. When we view it in this context, Castleman and Crossman concluded that we would need a 70% increase in annual recruitment to ensure the same number of free fish reach their maximum age and thus maximum trophy size. Follow that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now let me read your mind. I'll bet you're wondering if 99% of the muskies are being released, which is about what it runs.
He read my mind.
At least 95%.
Yeah.
How could the age of the oldest trophy-sized fish be decreasing? Good question, right? Two likely reasons. The ranks of the muskie fraternity are swelling at the same time that our knowledge base is better than ever before. There are quite simply more of us muskie anglers. We're better skilled, better equipped, and we're catching more fish. And while we're putting them back, catch and release only works if the fish survive, which means proper handling, and that's the big thing today. To put it the way my good friend and legendary muskie angler Dick Pearson, puts it like this. Take a look at any social media site these days, and you know that what he means. Got to give Dick credit too for walking the talk. He wrote The Amazing Muskies on the Shield, one of the most comprehensive how-to books on muskie fishing. But if you recall the front cover, it doesn't feature an angler holding a muskie as you would suspect, but rather a beautiful Lake of the Woods sunset. I know because I took the photo and gave it to Dick. He has caught more big muskies than almost any angler on the planet, and yet almost every time I call him for a photo to illustrate a feature on which I am working and have interviewed him, he tells me he doesn't have any. Gord writes for InFisherman, and he's on the InFisherman TV show.
Yep.
He keeps his fish in the water at all times and handles them exactly like what they are, the proverbial geese that lay the golden eggs. And if we all did the same thing this fall for the rest of our musky fishing careers, and in the process reduce the handling mortality of the oldest and biggest fish by just 4%, we would initiate the same effect as if we had increased the annual recruitment of muskies by a staggering 70%. In other words, their recruitment is poor,
Yep.
and if there's not any left to spawn, it's really poor. Let's give Castleman and Crossman the last word on the subject. The largest trophy muscalines in the population are usually the oldest individuals. The largest year classes produce the greatest number of old individuals. Hence, extremely large year classes are required to produce the largest, oldest trophy muscalines. If catch and release methods can be improved to reduce mortality, they would have the same effect as increasing recruitment and would help maintain year class strength, longevity, size, and number of trophy fish in the population. We don't need any more information, studies, nothing. It's already figured out by folks who have done the legwork. CPR is all fine and dandy, but more fish caught equals more dead fish, especially in the open, deep water scenarios and with more ill-equipped anglers just out for the ego shots. So
What are eagle shots?
Ego.
holding the
Eagle.
fish for a picture,
Yeah.
just for the eagle.
You know a real good way not to hurt those fish?
Pardon me?
You know, I got a real good way not to hurt the fish.
How's that?
Don't catch 'em.
Don't catch. That's true. That's the best way.
Which I've done a lot of.
But then
But
what's the
not
point?
catching. Yeah. So do you think that your how much has your fishing effectiveness changed over the years?
Oh, I can't even calculate it. When I first started fishing, that's a long time ago, boys, 68 years, I
How old are you right now?
was 82. We had a wooden rowboat, no depth finder, no electric motor, no big motor to run around like a crazy man they do today, and casted the shoreline. That's how we caught our fish. That's what we knew. We're fishing Floyd, which made shoreline fishing a little more productive. The big open Clearwater lakes, you pound the shoreline, you catch 300 northerns in a week, you won't catch any muskies. Been there, done that too.
Explain all that again now. So you grew up casting the shoreline,
Right.
and why would that not be effective now?
Well, it's still effective on Floyd's type reservoirs where there's a lot of wood and hiding places.
What's the word you're using?
Flowage.
Floyd.
Okay.
Like the river's dammed up, and they call them Flowages in Wisconsin. Reservoirs are the more common
Chester's
name.
nodding knowingly over here because
Yeah.
he uses the term flowage.
Yeah,
That's
we-
what that means.
That's his favorite lakes, the Flowages.
Yeah, we were just talking about one of them flowages.
So it's a reservoir
Right.
is a flowage.
Same difference.
Gotcha. So
The reason they called them Floyd is because, as you know, starting in the 1800s, 1880s, they started logging the whole state of Wisconsin.
yep.
And what was left was a mess. And a lot of that debris was in the watersheds. And when they put a dam in and made a flowage,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it looked like. It was flowed full of stuff. So
Oh, okay.
that's why they call them flowages.
Floated all that debris up.
Right. Right.
Gotcha.
In fact, it was almost impossible to run a motorboat wide open up a fairly new flowage. You're just risking death.
I see.
You know.
So back now that I understand that, casting the shoreline when you were young,
Right.
that's just how you went out and fished. You
Right.
went out and went along. I know the strategy you're talking about.
Right.
Go along the edge, cast up toward the shoreline again.
And you know, if you could find an offshore structure, and the way we did it in those days with a rock and a piece of rope, no depth finders again, then you had a secret honey hole.
Okay.
And then as depth finders came on the scene, you was able to read the lake bottom without dropping your rope and your rock down. And so all of that increases your knowledge.
Did you guys used to use the rock and rope strategy?
Started early on, yeah. Or in the Floyds that I was fishing, it was fairly shallow, so you could hit the bottom with the oar in most places.
And feel around down there.
Right. But then in the river channels, you couldn't touch anything.
Yep.
But the maximum depth is like 15 feet, except for a hole by the dam that's 33 feet deep. But the average depth of the whole lake is 7 feet.
Okay.
So, you know, then from that, you graduated to bigger waters. We went to Canada to catch big muskies. We used our lake, the first trip up there, we used our lakeshore casting, and we caught 300 northerns and no muskies.
Okay.
So we learned to get the hell away from shore and get out on the rock reefs and the deep weed beds and so forth.
Got it.
And that's the way all musky fishermen progress. They learn a little bit at a time. If the ones that have a little money and are smart, they hire a guide and cut their learning curve in half.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as more and more new equipment comes out, the big thing now is forward-facing sonar. It's going to kill the muskie populations if it's not controlled. It's too easy to sharpshoot them, and it becomes.
Explain that.
I've got a friend that kind of helped pioneer it in Minnesota. Run his boat 60 miles a day, and make 35 casts. And every cast was at a fish that you could see on the screen.
Yep.
And
You're talking about like live scope.
yeah, live scope,
For-
forward-facing sonar,
Okay.
same difference.
Yeah.
So
Do you have one of those setups?
I do not. And I here's the thing. I'm 82 years old. I've got 2 bad shoulders. This one needs replaced
Because of casting.
because of casting. So you would think something like that would intrigue me very much.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with it because it's not musky fishing. It's
Well, let me do a little devil's advocating.
okay.
I love it though. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me do a little devil's advocating. Do you feel that
On behalf of those who don't like hard work,
no, I don't have one of these contraptions. Now, if you look down across from you and down that way, you're going to see some real advocates.
You're really outing them.
Yeah, you're going to see some
We-
real cheaters.
This is
We don't use musky fishing
If
though.
they're used properly, if they're used properly, I don't have a problem with it.
Well, I'm more asking you to philosophize
Okay.
about the flow of technology.
Okay.
Don't you feel that you could have said the same thing about anything? Monofilament. Do you know what I mean like
Depth
you
finders.
You
or
could have said,
your depth finder and your I'm still using a rope and a rock, by God.
yeah. So how are you? Don't you feel? And I'm not trying to take you to task. I'm just like asking you to think about this because you obviously thought about this a great deal. You in your life, as you laid it out, you have welcomed with open arms all form of technological innovation.
To a point.
Okay, why is this the one that's going to
Because
break something?
Here's what's going to happen.
Okay,
It's going to if too many new people get into the game
yep,
and they're not ethical
yep,
and they run around the lake and spot fish and cast to them and catch them. There's one bass guy that did a film.
mm-hmm.
He caught 3 over 50 inches in a half a day because he was using
Because he's
the
so good
sonar.
on electronics.
Right,
He's like, I don't see what the big deal is.
right. So, but he had no concern in the fact that what he was actually doing.
But he wasn't throwing them on a stringer.
And the thing of it is, we don't know if he knew how to handle them.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a bass fisherman. They hold him by the lip, right?
Yeah.
Try holding a muskie by the
You're
lip
gonna have a sore thumb.
and see what happens. You get tooth running up through your thumb. So it's making experts out of rookies
Yeah,
almost instantly,
yeah.
and that's wrong.
They say the same thing about turkey decoys.
the
They say the same thing about everything.
Motion decoys, same thing. But
that's a hot topic, isn't it, Larry?
yeah, the thing of it is that yes, you can control to an extent with size limits and bag limits, but since the musky world is already 99% catch and release anyway, all we're doing is going to handle a hell of a lot more fish with a lot of new people that don't know how to handle them, which, as I just read there, mortality is the ultimate goal, to eliminate it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you educate 100,000 new musky fishermen to handle a 50-incher properly? In the first place, is first time it flaps its jaws, they're going to drop it in the bottom of the boat, and it's going to flop around and tip the tackle box over and
You're gonna
whatever.
fish with my kids.
Larry, what is the proper way to handle a muskie?
Well, the best way is like was mentioned here about Dick Pearson, is leave them in the water boat side. There's floating rulers that you can get to lay alongside them and see how long they are. Nobody agrees with weighing them if they're not a record class fish or your personal
Well, that
best.
seems like the last one you'd want to weigh because those are the big ones, the big breeding females.
Right.
Right. It's like in Florida where you cannot get a grip and grin with the tarpon. Cannot. Unless you buy a tag and you want to kill it. Then it's legal.
Groupers, you can't.
Oh,
even
it's
fish.
against the law to take a grip with a tarpon?
Yeah.
So all
But
that
unless-
getting in the water with them and taking pictures.
Yeah.
And,
But you have to have the intent. You have to purchase the tag and have the intent to weigh it for a record. And then everybody's okay.
Yeah, I got
And I'm like, so that's tarpon conservation.
Which means it's almost totally limiting handling mortality.
Unless I want to just buy a tag and bonk a fish, right?
And how many they're going to kill doing that? Not that many.
Well, do you routinely see poor handling methods among newer musky fishermen and then good handling methods among older musky fishermen?
Some older musky fishermen that don't catch a lot of muskies don't know how to handle them either.
They don't get the practice.
I mean, they're not an easy fish to handle.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're talking a 35, 30, 40, 45, 50 pound. That was a 40 pounder right there.
That's a 40. I'm just holding this up so people can see, like, you're going to shred your thumb.
Yeah. Now, what you have to consider there is even though they're sharp and long, there's a lot of meat on the
Yeah.
base of the teeth, so you're not going to see that much when you see the fish.
But you're
there's
seeing
still,
maybe that much.
Yeah, you'll see, and that'll go through your finger. In fact, a friend of mine run a 56-incher tooth all the way through his thumb, out through the thumbnail. Those teeth are razor sharp on one side and they're dull on the other side, and that's for a purpose. That's when they grab a bait fish. The sharp helps penetrate quickly, but the round sides keep it from ripping and making the holes bigger and bigger, and the forage can get away.
When we were in high school, we were having BB gun wars, and this dude named Tristan out at the slabs at Cedar Creek, he caught a BB that went through his finger and out the fingernail. That's excruciating pain.
I
man.
can imagine. Yeah.
Back to like though, if you are, Larry, gonna catch a muskie and you do want to get a picture with it, you got to make sure you keep it in the net, like with the face up. A lot of the times muskies will get in the net and thrash too, so those hooks will get caught on the higher side of the net and kind of hang the fish up higher. So that's a very common thing. You got to make sure you get that hook off, keep the fish's head in the water.
Right. A lot of the musky nets of today have a real deep bag, and like a Ranger boat's fairly high-sided, but not ridiculous. But these deep bag nets can keep the fish down in the water with the rim of the net on the gunnel of the boat.
You guys using barbless?
No, but there's a lot of guys that are saying that's what should be used.
Do you use live bait?
I used to. I don't anymore. But if you use what we call quick set rigs, I have no problem with it. But problem so far I've seen is some of the guides are not using quick set rigs to set quick. They're destroying the whole thought process of what you want the muskie to do is grab your sucker.
Yep.
There's two treble hooks on the sucker, and you set immediately, and you should hook the fish just like if they'd grabbed one of these lures here.
Yep.
Whereas
The harness rig, they kind of have a little thing or a hook that you can put through the nose of the sucker.
goes through the nostrils to hold it on the rig.
Yep.
But IGFA, for instance, if you use a sucker for muskies, they won't accept it, even though if it's a legal method in Wisconsin, which it is in all of Wisconsin, IGFA wouldn't accept it if you caught a 75-pounder. That's just their rules.
Is that because
no live bait?
They don't want people to use live bait?
They don't want live bait. No.
Here's a question about the IGFA. You're familiar with the Boone and Crockett Club?
Yes.
Okay. Boone and Crockett Club has different categories. So as you'll find, oftentimes the biggest specimen known to man was not killed by a hunter. Okay, the biggest bighorn, right? The world record, the biggest bighorn ever recorded was found dead. The biggest black bear, found dead. I think the biggest whitetail, found dead. Right? It's just kind of weird that it always winds up being that the really big ones are found dead. Is the IGFA interested in how big do they get, or are they only looking at fish that conform to their own little rule
That's
book?
pretty much it. Then IGFA started in 1939.
Okay.
It was pretty much a rich man's game at that point. Big offshore yachts and money people.
Yeah. Like billfish and all that got it going, right? Yeah.
Right. And they were totally saltwater until 1979.
Mm-hmm.
I started the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame World Record program in the early 70s. and Field and Stream at that time was the other record keeper in freshwater. And they got upset with us, and they tried to get us to cease and desist and whatever, claiming that those records were theirs. And our attorney told them to go fly a kite. Those records belong to the people who caught the fish, and they're in the public domain. We can use them if we want to, and we did. And then they backed off. So they eventually turned their freshwater program over to IGFA. Until that time, IGFA had no use for freshwater whatsoever. So somewhere along the late 70s, we decided to try to merge the two programs, IGFA and the Hall of Fame. So I flew to Fort Lauderdale, where they were headquartered at the time.
Yep.
And we had a meeting with LWK Harry, who was the president at the time. And
They got that big, it's a big marlin out front, right?
yeah,
A big silver
well,
marlin.
I don't remember if they did it in Fort Lauderdale. They probably do it at Fort Dania Beach, where they're at now, or in
Okay.
Dania Beach. But anyway, it was going to work out where there'd just be one record-keeping program. Well, the one stipulation that the Hall of Fame wanted is they wanted IGFA to allow them to print the records in their publications.
Mm-hmm.
And IGFA wouldn't allow it until after they'd published it. Well, that didn't sit well with the founder and the director of the Hall of Fame, so he was smart. When he turned over the records, he made copies of everything, so he just reconstituted the program, and back again we came with two programs. So I was a representative for IGFA for 16 years, and when the Musky Wars started, I got crossways with the
What's the
president.
Musky War?
The world records, the Musky Wars. Started in 92. And
Well, you have to explain that, but when you're ready.
okay, let's jump horses here for a second. Let's go back to the 72-pounder and work backwards.
Okay.
Now, that seems to be a logical way to do it.
I want to hear about the Musky War.
We'll get to that.
We're going to get there.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Oh, by the way, Muskies Canada, they even put Release, that's the name of their magazine.
Release Journal.
The Release Journal, yeah.
Golly.
That's how gung-ho musky fishermen are for catching redfish.
Man, those guys would probably have a shit fit if you went spearfishing muskies, man.
Since you brought up, again, the release thing, I want to know what makes the fish so fragile that this improper handling can cause
Well,
such high mortality?
Most musky fishermen net them, and then people that don't know how to handle them well bring them in the boat,
Mm-hmm.
They're strong.
and the fish are flopping all over the bottom of the boat, beating themselves all to hell. So then they get them unhooked, if they ever get them unhooked. Then the muskie jumps out of the net and he's flopping around the bottom of the boat and trying to bite somebody on the leg. Anyway, the fish pretty much beat themselves up. So if you release them in the water, obviously the only thing you're going to have to do is reach down with the pliers and back the hooks out.
Mm-hmm.
Lay a measuring stick alongside them to get an idea of. I mean,
Well, isn't there an idea here, and it goes the same for like big pike too, but a muskie and a pike are ambush predators. They're
right,
not.
They're cousins. They're first cousins.
They're not designed to go on these big, long marathon runs. They're like a mountain lion. Dive bomb out of the tree, fight real hard for hopefully a very limited amount of time. Sprinters versus marathon runners. So they're not going to be able to deal with this big buildup of lactic acid. So it takes them way longer to recover. And during that recovery period, they're susceptible to predation as well. Or in the case of your older fish, they may just not be able to recover from it.
Yeah, they are terrific speed demons for short distance.
Mm-hmm.
They can go 60 miles an hour for a short burst. That's why all the major fins are at the back of the fish.
Hmm.
When they wind up, they wind up into an S shape, and it's just like shooting a bow out of an arrow.
How fast can they hit?
60 miles an hour for a short distance.
No kidding.
Jeez.
Huh.
If you're in a 20-foot boat, they can go from one end of that boat to the other end of the boat before you can blink. That's how fast they are. But they can't keep it up.
Yeah.
In other words, if I've got a friend that likes to play them before we land them. We always are getting on his case saying you're going to get in a snag and lose the fish, just so you hurry up and get it so we can net it and let it go. Because if you play them for a half, like there's stories in the
He
old
likes
days.
to feel it fight.
There's stories in the old days of an hour fight or a half-hour fight or 45-minute fight. If anybody takes more than 5 minutes to land a fish, unless it's a really big one, they're messing around with it. Or they don't have heavy enough equipment to handle the fish, and they shouldn't be fishing for them in the first place.
Now you'll hear when somebody hooks a muskie, oftentimes, keep reeling, keep reeling, keep reeling, like a lot of guides,
Yeah, get the fish to the boat.
Yeah, because if you keep reeling, you're keeping tension on the fish.
Yeah.
The minute you give them a split second of slack, they're gone.
A lot of the times they eat that bait so hard that they just have, they're clamped on the bait. You never really got a hook set in there.
Gotcha. Yeah.
When I was working on the tracking study on Eagle Lake in '86, we would put them in a tank of anesthetic and put them to sleep, so that we could put a transmitter in them, so we could pump their stomach to see what they'd been eating.
Mm-hmm.
We had one big fish. It was probably a 35-pound fish, and we put a mouth spreader. You know what a mouth spreader is?
Yep.
Put a mouth spreader in the fish to hold it open until we could put the tube in to flush the stomach. The fish is dead asleep. Just squish that mouth spreader completely closed just that fast, and it's asleep. That's the power they got in those jaws.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times they'll grab that bait. They might be hooked, or you think they're hooked for 3, 4, 5 minutes, and all of a sudden they look at you and they open the mouth or they shake their head, and poof, they never had a hook in them.
That bait, particularly that bulldog right there, if you look at that bait, there's teeth marks on it.
Yep.
That fish that I caught on that bait did not have a single hook on it. As soon as it hit the net, it opened its mouth.
This is your own little lure, Chester.
Yeah. As soon as it hit the net and opened its mouth, the bait popped out.
In the fall, particularly, when I used to do a lot of sucker fishing, they would grab the sucker, and my dad would always raise them up to see how big they were, because we didn't want to catch a small one.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times as they get up to where you can see them, they let it go. But if you drop it back down, they'll come right back and hit it again.
Because he never got hooked.
Because he never got hooked, but he never got stung either.
Yep.
And he's hungry. So he once had sucker, but he ain't gonna let you get a look at him for very long. We've had him drop it and pick it up 2, 3, 4 times.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get them and sometimes you don't.
Tell us about this 72-pounder, the start of the Musky Wars, right?
Actually, this didn't start the Musky Wars, but it's reignited them a little bit.
Is this the crew we told you about?
The manifesto. I've got the manifesto right here.
How'd you get it?
Who do you think you're dealing with?
Okay, let's talk about the
this
manifesto.
guy right here.
I'll tell you how I got it. Observer number 5 sent it to me.
Oh.
After several months on the internet talking about it, they didn't know anything about it. It was on the internet. They found out, and he sent me this.
But I think he sent it to me.
Yeah, he sent it to you, and then after I found out about it and put some more about it on the internet, then he sent me a copy, and then I called him the next day. We talked for 40 minutes, and
okay, can we refresh people's memory? What started this whole thing of Larry being here was we gathered show up in the mail,
Yeah.
and whatever. Now and then I'll just go through mail on my desk, and there's this big thing called the Musky Manifesto, and it's photographs, documentation, all kinds of stuff. And basically, it's a story about how some guys got boned by the IGFA. They caught a giant. Everybody knows it was a giant. It was a world record. And the fish got thrown out on a stupid technicality.
That's what they claim. Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing,
Right,
but I don't think I'm being. I'm not.
That's really the meat of the deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the meat of the deal. That's what started this whole conversation, and I started talking about my understanding of the musky community and how they're touchy fellers.
There's the picture
That's the picture I know.
Right. When it appeared on the internet on a post that I had started,
Let me hold that for you.
Somebody sent it in with the heads cut off of the anglers.
This is what started this conversation. Is this guy saying that they had a 72-pounder? Everybody knows it's a 72-pounder, but they weighed it on a boat, and IGFA threw it out because you can't weigh fish on boats.
Now, that's not the only rule that they broke for IGFA.
Tell me more.
The scale must be recertified after weighing. They said they had it checked, but they didn't tell me how.
They had it checked after. Yeah.
and it was weighing light actually, which means the fish weighed 73 pounds.
Yeah. He
Whatever.
he said that in the manifesto. Turns out it's even bigger.
The length measurement must be done on an IGFA bump board. In other words, a measuring board on a flat surface.
Okay.
They didn't have that, so they couldn't comply with that rule. You got to have a picture of the rod, reel, and scale and photo of the fish on the scale showing the weight. Didn't have that. In fact, the guy who wrote the manifesto was one of the 5. There were 3 cousins and 2 uncles.
Okay.
Dads of the cousins. And supposedly, after the guy stood on the seat of the boat and lifted the fish up high enough for the scale to register, only 2 of the 5 guys could see the scale reading. This guy that wrote the manifesto did not see it. So he's hanging his hat on it that it's the biggest muskie ever caught, but he didn't even see it weighed himself. As far as the measurement.
Hunter, did you do some phone calls, Larry?
Pardon?
You did some phone calls about this?
Yeah.
He's the
I track
investigator.
anything big.
You do?
Yeah. The final fly in the ointment, and IGFA told me personally that had it not been weighed in the boat, that there were several other things that they would have pursued before they would ever recognize it. Length measurement, as I told you, has to be done on their bump board. Here's how they did it. On the inside of the gunnel of the boat, about halfway between the gunnel and the floor, there was a 50-inch ruler stuck to the boat.
Sure.
Okay?
I've been in those boats.
I got one of my own.
It took all 5 of them to hold the fish against that tape, and then they had a 3-foot bump measurement that they measured the distance past that tape, where one of the guys marked the spot, and then they measured, and they said it was 6.5 inches. Well, IGFA would never accept that if the world came to an end. So I understand that he wants his uncle to be a world record holder, but it's never going to happen, and it couldn't have happened in those circumstances. And here's the kicker. Because Lac Seul is total catch and immediate release, keyword immediate, and the conservation officers, I think, are a little bit lenient to let you take a picture. Quick one. But had the CO came by while they were monkeying around like this, they would have gotten a fine immediately.
You think so?
Yeah, no question about it.
So that rules out having a new world record.
In Lac Seul.
But that's what you said it's going to come out of.
But
I said it had the potential.
IFGA out the window. When you look at that picture, what do you see?
Okay.
Is it like even in the right class of
Compare
fish?
those 2 pictures.
I think Larry's jealous. Ooh. Does fish make you jealous, Larry?
That one don't, because I caught it.
Okay, I see what you're saying here. So I'm supposed to. I'm looking at these 2 fish.
Pretty close in
Just going by
what you see, they look like they're pretty close to the same size.
because they're
fish.
both being held up by 2 people standing side by side.
Right.
Yeah, I would superficially be like, yeah, those are in the ballpark. Roughly the same size fish.
Okay, my fish was 57 1/4 inches, which is slightly longer than they claimed for their fish.
Okay.
We weighed it on a certified scale, state certified scale. It weighed 54 pounds, 4.5 ounces. That's
So
a
do I?
long
So you're
way
saying,
from-
do I see 20 pounds of blubber on that fish that the other
Exactly.
fish doesn't have?
Exactly.
And 20 pounds is a pile of blubber.
And on my thread on Musky First that ran for over 3 months, in fact, it's still up, there was not a single person that said it weighed 60 pounds, let alone 70, including Dick Pearson that was referenced here a while ago when we were talking. It just is, it's not there. It's not there. And in the manifesto, there's 11 more pictures besides that one. And there's several pictures of it in the guy's laps. And none of those pictures except one does it even have a little bit of belly. So there's just no way that fish weighed 18 pounds more than my fish weighed.
Yeah. Even if it had a sucker in it.
Yeah, I mean,
A couple more pounds.
It would have had more than it would have had a 10-pound whitefish or something in it to get
Some
close to
lead
70
weights.
pounds. Pardon?
Some lead weights.
Most people, it sounds like most people out there fishing, and maybe I'm wrong about this. I like to fish, but not as much as a lot of fellas in this room. But that you wouldn't be prepared to
Most people-
to officially have a record fish in your boat,
And
what
obviously
to
they
do.
weren't.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. And one of the things
Well, when
I've-
you go fishing, are you prepared?
Yes, absolutely. carry my certified scale right in the boat.
You can't weigh it in the boat.
Well, we can pull right up to shore and get out.
That's not immediate release.
But I ain't fishing Lac Seul either. I'm on the St. Lawrence River.
Oh.
This is
Any more brain busters?
Here's the thing. There might be a way you could do it on Lac Seul if they relax that rule a little bit, and they're working on it.
Yeah, I could imagine.
If you pulled the boat to shore, if you had a cradle, you know what a cradle is?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Instead of a dip net,
Yeah.
you put the fish in the cradle, you ease the boat to shore, somebody gets out of the boat, lifts the cradle up and hooks it to the scale. You should be able to get it above the water
Yeah.
if you're on solid ground.
Well, it's obviously feasible because I mean they'll do it on like great white sharks are an ESA species and they'll get weights off great whites and cradles. So I mean there's a way to do it, right?
Yeah.
If you got the right expertise.
Right. So that's the only way that they could have come even close to complying with IGFA rules if they'd been prepared. And what I've been trying to beat into people's mind is if you have any idea that you want to catch a world record muskie, or if you're fishing where the potential exists, which every place that's got muskies, it's not there, then you should have a copy of the rules, whether it's IGFA, whether it's a Fishing Hall of Fame, or whether it's the modern day Muskie World Record program that I've started, and have the equipment that you need to follow those rules. And here's the kicker that you might like, since you're a meat eater, is for my program, it has to be a dead fish. They have to keep the fish.
Why is that?
Because here's the thing, and if you read my book, you'll find what happened in past history. That different wet sand put in fish, Coke bottles full of sand in fish to add weight.
Oh, because you want to get a look inside there.
My program is we have to have a representative at the time the fish is opened, and we have to check the stomach contents. We'll check it for water. We'll check it for bait fish. We'll check it for sand and rocks.
Bait fish is fine.
Yeah, if they weren't stuffed in there by the angler. Then that's going to be a tough call if it ever happens. But depending on the size of the forage, you should be able to tell whether the muskie grabbed the fish or whether it didn't.
If something fishy's going on.
Yeah. So
You like that, Cal?
and people criticize us some for saying we have to kill the fish,
Yeah.
but that's one fish out of a zillion.
Yeah, how often is that going to
I
happen?
mean, the last big
Well,
muskie
plus,
caught
if
was
you educate your anglers and say you're going to kill this fish because you're positive it's a new record.
well,
right?
And if you're smart, you got a scale on the boat to find out before you kill it.
Yep. Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And I've got some,
I got what you're saying.
I've
So
got
this
some-
should be like a once in a generation activity.
Right. I mean, I've got some pictures here of I won't dig them out, but there's been a couple really big fish caught out of the St. Lawrence River in the last couple of years, and they had scales on the boat. They had lots of witnesses. Yes, they waited on the boat, but they weren't going for a record anyway, so they just wanted to know how big it was. It was almost 60 pounds.
What I'm getting worried about here is I want to make sure we talk that you explain what the Musky Wars were. But when you call a person up, when you're investigating a fish, well, how many fish have you investigated in your career?
Oh, quite a few. I mean,
Have you made your living writing and fishing
Yeah.
and guiding?
not completely, but a good portion of it.
So you had points you've had a day job.
Yeah.
Yeah. What line of work were you in?
For instance, our modern day muskie world record is 58 pounds. That's the modern record.
Okay.
It was caught in Michigan.
Oh.
It was put in the freezer.
What river?
It was in the Bel Air chain, the Torch River chain.
Oh, yep.
Okay. And they took it to a taxidermist. One of our committee members went to the taxidermist, remeasured the fish, reweighed the fish, and then it was stayed in the freezer for 4 months. And they shipped it to Minnesota to have a replica made, a mold for a replica. And so I made arrangements to be there when they got the fish. They thawed the fish out. I was there when it was opened. I reweighed it first to make sure it weighed close to what it was claimed to be, and it was actually over because it absorbed a little bit of the water from thawing overnight. So then I weighed the fish again. And it was Okay, and then when they opened the stomach, all it had was a skeleton of a 13-inch smallmouth. The head almost completely gone, and obviously no weight there.
He ate a keeper smallmouth.
And 2 1/3 pounds of eggs is all it had in it. So it had just started getting eggs.
Got it.
For the fall, and this was in October, so it was not starting real early. Probably into December before they really start building up eggs and do it through the winter and spawn.
So you got to personally handle the world record.
Yes, the modern day record.
How many fish have you investigated?
Oh, not a lot because there's not been a lot of records caught, but I've investigated other fish than just a modern day record. But we've
Like
also
when you invest, like I would say you investigated this fish,
Right.
the Musky Manifesto fish.
My investigation of the world records took up the whole book. That's all just world records right there.
And
That whole thing is about the past world records.
A compendium of musky angling history. Muskellunge world records, the history, the truth.
The truth.
1877 to 2006.
Right.
But you've investigated far more fish than that because you obviously debunked a few along the way, right?
But he
Yeah.
puts them in there, don't you?
Yeah, they're in there, all
Oh,
in there, yeah.
But does it get adversarial?
And that book's available on Amazon, by the way, and also Kindle if you just want to get it on your iPod.
Got it. Does it get adversarial?
It can,
I
but
picture.
it didn't because I've not.
With this kid, were you guys getting on each other's nerves?
we got along fine. We had a nice conversation. I understood where he was coming from. He was thrilled to death for his uncle to catch the fish.
Yep.
And they all thought they had a world record. But from what I understand, what I was told, and not from this kid, but from the resort people or people associated with the resort people, the scale they used was a $20 Amazon scale. So it can't be real repeatable. And that's what you need for a good scale. It's got to be repeatable.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows? Maybe because he jumped up on the seat and tried to get the fish up. It took him 2 lifts to get a tail off the ground or off the floor of the boat. And so it had to be, you're standing there with all that weight, supposedly 72 pounds. I mean, he lifted weights a little bit, but try it sometime. It's not easy to lift 40 pounds, let alone 70. So whether the scale jiggled or whether the boat rocked, who knows? But nobody believes it weighed 72 pounds. If they want to believe it, that's fine. More power to them. And if they want that to be their family goal, go for it. But I'm not buying it.
Ain't going in the book.
I probably won't do any more revisions. I'm getting too old.
Okay, tell me about why did the Musky Wars start the year I finished high school? And is there a correlation?
I never thought about that. Okay, in 1991.
Sorry, I finished 92.
John Detloff, who's a amateur historian in my hometown, or where I live now, Hayward,
A
Wisconsin.
musky historian or a historian?
He's pretty much he's a historian, but heavy into musky.
Okay.
So he decided that he was going to investigate it, and so he used his amateur photo analysis to try to debunk Arthur Lawton's 69-pound, 15-ounce muskie from the St. Lawrence River.
69 pound.
69-15 from St. Lawrence River in 1957. The thing of it is, it could have all stopped right there if I had my head on straight, or if anybody else would have thought about it. The pictures that he used to analyze,
Okay.
there is no way to prove that the scales that Field and Stream, or the pictures that Field and Stream published, were the actual pictures of the fish. IGFA's reason for setting the record aside, and they never did do a complete disqualification. It's still in set-aside status. But at that time in 57, Field and Stream did not require a photograph even. But IGFA did, so they weren't sure that the pictures that they had were the right fish, so they put it in set-aside status until another picture could be found. Well, I'd found it and produced it and had a meeting with them in 2007, but they still rejected it. But that was all baloney, because when the World Record Muskie Alliance challenged Cal Johnson's 1957 or 1949 67 pounder. Lost my chain of thought.
You were talking about the amateur historian.
Okay, we're off of him for a minute.
Yep.
The WRMA, which is a World Record Muskie Alliance, they were trying to prove which world record muskies were indeed legitimate.
Yeah, which of these guys actually had it.
Right, and so they had a professional photogrammetrist and now analyze the photographs. As the same thing they did for Spray's fish, which was 6911, the one that Lawton beat. And when they denied the WRMA's protest and also Louis Spray's protest for the haul, well, anyway, IJFA said that they decided that you can't prove the weight of a fish from a two-dimensional photograph.
Yeah.
Which I agree with.
Yep.
But what you can prove from photogrammetry is, for instance, in the case of the Johnson fish, it was actually 25% smaller than what they claimed by photo analysis of both the fresh fish and the mount after it was mounted.
Got it.
If you overlay the outline of both the mounted fish and the fresh fish, is the same thing they did with Spray's fish. One is way shorter than the other one. 10 inches in Spray's case, maybe more than that, and 7.5 in Johnson's fish. And if you come to Hayward, I'll buy you, or you can buy me a beer. I'll take you to the Moccasin Bar and show you Johnson's Mountain. I'll show you exactly how they did it. And I've had quite a few beers over that.
What
fish.
bar? And what bar?
Moccasin Bar.
Oh, Moccasin.
Hang in the Moccasin Bar in a glass case.
Still there now.
Still there now. And
what's it say underneath it?
Cal Johnson's world record muskie, because they didn't want to claim world record muskie because supposedly Spray's fish beat it, but Spray's fish was a lie anyway. So, but anyway, that's.
It was a lie or a mistake?
No, it was a lie. Louis the Liar, I call him.
Oh, does he have a history of lying?
Gloves are
Yes,
off.
it started in 1939.
Is he still alive?
Everything was pretty kosher up till 1939. Lake of the Woods in 1929, 1931, 1932 produced world record muskies. The biggest one of all of them was 58 pounds and 4 ounces. That was 1932.
And this is like the heyday.
Right. The heyday of Lake of the Woods.
Yeah.
But it still, to this day, never produced a 60-pound fish.
Okay.
So in 1939, there was a gentleman named Percy Haver in Detroit, Michigan, making lures and wanting to become a big deal, so he supposedly caught a world record.
He wants to play the game.
And that was in June.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in July, Louis Spray came up with one just a little bit bigger, and so he had the world record. But before the year was out, a guy who had never fished muskies before and borrowed a rod and reel, skipped work and went fishing with his buddies on Eagle Lake. By noon the first day, had a 60-pound, 8-ounce legitimate fish.
Legit.
In fact, John Detloff has not challenged that fish to this day. So, anyway, that was 1939. Well, Spray wasn't happy about having the record for just a short period of time. And I think the reason that he did it in the first place was coming out of the Depression, the war's getting ready to go crazy, and tourism was at a low ebb, and he owned a tavern. So what better way to get business than a world record muskie?
Yeah,
So,
probably a couple, but yeah.
When he got the first one, he put it on ice in his bar, had everybody write in a book what they guessed that it weighed before he ever told anybody how much it weighed.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1940, he decided to do it again. But Hayward already beat him with a bigger one in 1940, so this is 2 years in a row Hayward's got a world record, and 2 years in a row Spray's thought he had a world record, but he was already beat before it was caught. But yet he still claimed even on his tombstone today, here lies the remains of Louis Spray, 3 world record muskies in his day. So he had the
That's on his tombstone?
That's on his tombstone in Hayward, Wisconsin graveyard.
Is that a picture in your book?
I don't have a picture of the tombstone, but it's in
Chester's going to get one.
It's in a book someplace.
So when it was all said and done, that's what he wanted on there.
Right.
Not like loving father.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So
3-time.
and that was his supposed second world record, but it wasn't. And then that same year, another Eagle Lake fish, big fish, was caught, 61 pounds, 9 ounces, but it had already been beaten twice. So there was 6 record potential fish caught in 2 years, and 4 of them by the two guys with 2 each.
Mm-hmm.
So things went quiet for a while. Louis moved out of Hayward. He sold his tavern. He moved to Rice Lake and bought another tavern and kind of got out of the muskie game. In 1947, a 64.5-pound fish was caught in Vilas County, Wisconsin. And, of course, right away the rumors start, and the game warden said he had it in a pen fattening it up, and, you know, the usual rumors.
Throwing kittens in a little baby pool. yeah, I love it.
So Detloff, he was trying to disprove every big muskie that was caught except those were caught in Hayward, with the exception of the Eagle Lake fish, and I don't know why he skipped those 2. So anyway, he tried to discredit the Hanser fish, and he never did dispute the fact that it was 58 inches long. But when the picture was taken of Hanser holding the fish, he had already gutted the fish and taken 12 pounds of spawn out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it looked like it's, a tube that was 58 inches long and couldn't have possibly weighed 64.5 pounds. But he had certified scale, he had all the affidavits necessary and everything. So that kind of died down. Then in 49...
Can I tell you something? I signed up for a turkey derby one time in Elroy, Wisconsin, at the bar. And I gutted my turkey and brought it down there. And everybody had a big laugh about how I gutted it. Well, the next day we stopped back down there and we come in. They're still in there. He gutted it.
He gutted it. What, they go by
What
weight?
kind of,
What
kind of idiot?
Cost yourself there, didn't you? So anyway, 1949, Cal Johnson caught a supposed 67.5-pounder. And what
Nice
I would
fish. Nice fish.
like you to do a little photo analysis, if you would.
Okay.
There's 3 pictures of his supposed 67.5-pounder and 1 picture of a 44-pounder, and they don't look much different. And
Well, bottom right is a real stud.
Well, I think before we would start this, don't you think we would say, Mr. Rinella, we'd like you to perform a photo analysis for the group, but before you do that, could you please tell us your background? Like, how are you qualified to judge these photos?
just eyeballing.
I have caught a tiger muskie.
Wow.
And many, many, many 24, 22-inch northerns.
Yeah.
And these are all whoppers.
Well, one of the things that was...
But I got to say this. In all seriousness, I'm not not a seasoned muskie fisherman. I mean, maybe you can help explain it, but come on. How much can you what can you tell from any of these photos?
Not a lot, actually, unless they're done professionally by a photogrammetrist. But the thing that stuck me was I bought this magazine at a flea market, and it was written, a Cal Johnson article written the year before he got his record.
Okay.
Out of the same lake where he supposedly got his record. And that's the picture right there. And strangely, a year later, he catches a fish that looks a lot like that fish and claims it to weigh 67.5 pounds and claims a new world record and won an automobile.
What?
So this may be totally legitimate. This may be, may not be that fish. It may be that fish. I don't know. I don't really care. But here's how lax record keeping was even then, 1949. This is a letter from Field and Stream, who were the world record keepers at the time.
Now, at that point in time, was Field and Stream, because they've sold off the rights to that name in all kinds of different ways.
They were
so it was
Field-
affiliated with the magazine back then.
Right.
Yeah.
So, letter to Cal Johnson. We recently received a clipping covering your 67.5-pound muskellunge catch. Congratulations on a fine catch and setting a new world record. We'd like very much to have an entry from you in our annual fishing contest, and an entry blank is enclosed herewith for that program. They actually chased the record. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Also, in the case of the world records, if possible, we would like to have an affidavit attesting to the accuracy of the scales on which the fish was weighed To this day, there's never been any proof the scales were certified, and it was weighed on 2 different scales, as well as 2 or 3 additional witnesses to the weighing and measuring. This is not because we have any doubt as to the weight, but merely serves as a protection to both ourselves and to the angler. If you have 1 or 2 good pictures to spare, we would appreciate receiving those also. That's how lax world records certification was in those days.
Yep.
So
When you go into looking at a fish, when you go into investigating a fish, are you hoping, and you gotta be honest, okay? I want to tap into your deepest, most honest thought.
I'm ready for you.
Are you hoping it's a phony, or are you hoping it's a new world record?
I'm glad you asked that question. When I wrote the first edition of the compendium, 1981, I did everything I could to prove that the records were legitimate. I did not go looking for any negatives.
Got it.
If one would have popped up, I would have jumped all over it. But my goal was to record history. That was it. And so I was trying to find every bit of information I could that would substantiate the fish.
Got it.
That was in 1981. 1997, I did an update. Kind of screwed it up a little bit, but I was back on the track of these fish were bogus. And then I did this 3rd edition in 2007. And that's a very, very hard read, Volume 1, because it gets so much into depth and of how we determine this and how we determine that and what have you. But when Detloff first made his proposal to get Lawton's fish disqualified,
Yep.
I was working a lot of hours, just traveling. I was moving from one town to another, and so I didn't really scrutinize it like I should have, and I regret that ever since. In fact, it keeps me awake nights. But
because you wish what would have happened.
I wish I would have looked at it closer, because as you will see if you read this, I've spent probably a fifth of that book debunking his protest, his
like he wasn't being fair.
right, and he proved that out on his own self by when the WRMA protested the spray fish, the 6911 fish that replaced the 6915 Lawton fish. I was at that time I was on the hall board. I was the world record advisor, and WRA made the protest. It was a 90-some page, this big black notebook here of all the things that they found that Louis a no good son of a bitch and
A 90-page takedown.
right. They would not allow me to sit in on the meeting to review this protest, even though I'm the world record advisor for the hall, and I built that program from scratch. So I asked John Detloff, who at the time was the director of the Hall of Fame, or the president of the board. I says, why can't I sit in on this meeting? He says, because that's the way I want it. Because he knew if I was there, he couldn't control the narrative.
Yep.
In fact, he allowed me 15 minutes to make a presentation to the board, and that was it. And they had blow-ups of the affidavits as big as that plain picture behind you there. And so one of the board members asked me, he says, how can you contest these affidavits? I said, ask that gentleman there, because Lawton had 5 legitimate affidavits to the weight of his fish. And when Detloff did his protest and they disqualified it, 4 of those witnesses came forward and re-signed another affidavit that the fish was legitimate. And he found 3 new witnesses. 3 new witnesses were found. 2 of them made affidavits, and one of them was a next-door neighbor to Lawton's. And he verified. Detloff made up his own affidavit for the kid to sign, so he didn't really understand what he was signing. But what he did say in there was that on subsequent weekends, the Lawtons brought home one weekend 9 big fish. The biggest one was 49 pounds. And the next weekend's when he got the 6915. And he was witness to both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Where Detloff was trying to say that because the photographs that appeared in Field and Stream were of the 49-pounder, that's the one Lawton was claiming to be the 69-pounder.
Yep.
And so then IGFA, after the WRMA protest, said that you can't tell from a two-dimensional photograph the weight of a fish, but my comeback to them was, but you can tell if it was phonied up enough because the photogrammetry proves that it was 25% smaller than it actually claimed to be, and plus you got the witnesses, the weight witness. He said the current president of the IGFA said that IGFA recognizes all tackle records by scale weight only, period. Well, we had, 10 affidavits or so of Lawton's fish, and they won't reinstate it? I want to know why. They won't answer me. But if it's by witnessed weight on a certified scale, which it was,
What's the argument?
they won't tell me. They won't talk to me. They'll talk. The other guys will talk to me. The record keeper now will talk to me, but the president won't talk to me. I've sent him 2 letters, and he's not answered either one of them. So
you've lost friendships over this whole thing.
Absolutely. I told him, you're a hypocrite. IGFA is hypocritical. You first set Lawton aside because of the photograph, but that wasn't it at all. Because when it comes to Johnson's fish, it can't go by photographs, so we're going to go by scale weight, certified scale weight. Well, Lawton had all that, so he should have never been disqualified in the first place. Oh yeah, I've lost a lot of friends over it. I lost, the guy that did the protest. The current director of the Hall of Fame was my best friend at the time, and that went by the wayside. In fact, we were supposed to go to Texas duck hunt, and he had to cancel the trip so he could stay there and help build their bullshit case against the WRMA protest. So
When was that?
that was in 2006.
Have you ever seen guys come to blows over muskies?
Don't think so. I mean, there's a lot of bad blood in the musky world, but there's a lot of good blood in the musky world too. I mean, the serious. I know all the top names in the game.
Yeah.
Fished with a lot of them, friends with a lot of them. My personal guide on the St. Lawrence River is probably the best on the planet. I'm biased a little bit, but he's caught over 50 pounders.
Wow.
It's nobody in history. I mean, very few musker fishermen ever catch a 30-pounder, let alone a 50-pounder. And he's caught 2 58.5-pounders. His clients have caught him, but he was the guide. I mean, in my mind, that fish that I showed you that I caught, it was his fish. He put us on the fish. I just reeled it in.
What do you think about, what do you think about a world, a subset, a fishing, hunting subset, whatever, that gets to where everything, it just winds up being that every picture is like what an idiot someone is. They did that wrong. They caught a big one, but they were lucky. They didn't deserve it. They must have been lying.
That's jealousy, most of it. Yeah. There's a lot of that goes on. But, the guys that are consistent, they're respected. They're respected, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's always some screwballs that will make fun or deny anything.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like this fish, let's say it did weigh 72 pounds.
It's a hell of a big fish then.
If it had been properly documented, we would be celebrating it. The one thing that blew me away, and I kind of got that explained to me when I talked to observer number 5, that anybody in the musky world that I know, if they catch a world record, they're going to be screaming from the rooftops.
Yeah.
I mean, and some guys would be looking for sponsorships and whatever, and free taxidermy and the whole 9 yards, but not a peep out of these guys. And so I put a challenge on the post that I made on Musky First, and not a peep. And I thought the guy that published the picture without the heads was one of the group. Well, it turns out that when I talked to observer number 5, he said that it's obviously one of our inner circle, but we don't know who it was. It wasn't one of the 5. So that's one thing that had thrown me, was why we weren't hearing from them back. Like, we show you a picture and won't tell you nothing else.
Yep.
And I emailed this guy private email a couple times and never got any response because he wasn't part of the group. He didn't know anything.
Was there a time when you, how bad did you want to be a world record holder?
Oh, since 1957.
You were hoping for that to happen.
I mean,
Have you given up, or you think you still got a chance?
I still got a shot. But here's the thing: you got to fish where they are.
Uh-huh.
And I always tell people, if you want to catch a big muskie, you got to go where big muskies live.
Amen.
And if you don't, your odds are zero.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things about, we promote catch and release for every body of water, because all of them can be hurt with too much pressure and too much harvest.
Yeah.
As I've proven, I think, based on mortality. And the more newcomers that come to the game and don't know how to handle these fish, it's going to get worse. So we need to start a bigger education program on how to handle these fish. But, experience tops everything. You got to handle a few of them to learn how to handle them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a double-edged sword. But if we get too many at one thrust in the game and they don't know how to handle them, they're going to kill everything they catch, and we'll be back to the mid 1950s, and 100,000 fish would go to the grave every year.
Hmm.
So, and that's
You know what this guy's actual name is? Musky Chet.
Musky Chet.
This guy's coming hot on your heels, dude.
That's all right. I welcome it. In fact, I've been trying to find somebody to take over for me because I'm not going to live forever.
There you go, Chester.
There we go. I'll be the next musky.
You got a spare room?
Unfortunately, no. But I need somebody to move in for a while. The problem I've got, and I was talking to
Corinne
at lunch today. I said, if you were to saw the top of my head off,
got you.
Be a bunch of little muskies swim around.
Reminds me of the brain worms.
If it wasn't muskies, what do you think it would have been? Because you know what?
Ducks.
Oh, already know.
Oh, I was a big time duck hunter for a long time. Yeah.
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 Do you feel like you got a little bit of a do you feel like you got like some like OCD or like do you feel that if it wasn't for muskies you would have been into something that you can count?
Probably.
Something that you could qualify.
Probably.
Yeah. We met a guy, he passed away recently, that was an antler collector.
Okay.
Right? And if God had never put antlers on deer, that son of a bitch would have been collecting something. I don't know what it would have been. It would have been petrified rocks. It would have been like something. He was born
to collect.
Well,
and I kind of
it's just like a freak chance,
right?
He got onto antlers.
I've got all kinds of collections: musky pins, musky buttons, musky patches, musky bottles, musky wine glasses, musky beer cans. You name it, musky, I got it. It's just.
Do you feel like are you glad about it?
I
mean, are you ever afraid you'd someday be like, God damn it, really muskies?
No,
my whole life?
No, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't go back and start something different.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm happy with where I've been and still going.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the fate of the fishery?
I'm worried about the new handling explosion with new anglers, and I'm worried about forward-facing sonar. If the guys use it ethically, I got no problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
What's an ethical way versus a not ethical way?
Okay, muskies, big muskies, spend a lot of time in deep water.
Barotrauma.
Is that same with northerns?
Yeah, the big northerns. Small northerns stay shallow.
Yeah.
So if in the summertime when the water surface temperature is 75, 78, even 80 degrees, and you're pulling a fish out of 40 feet of water that's probably 68 degrees down there, you're going to kill that fish, pretty much. And that's where the ethics come in.
Yeah.
And then,
Like you're going to use this technology, they're going to handle more fish, they're going to be catching more fish in the wrong places, they're going to be maybe not so educated on how to deal with them once they do catch them.
Right.
And it's just each fish is going to be more exposed to a higher likelihood of getting handled. You hearing this, Chester?
Yeah, so I've got, this is, like I said, this topic is opening up a can of worms. There are some forward-facing sonar is there. There's absolutely no doubt that it helps you catch fish. Like,
oh, absolutely.
There's
the panfish guides are loving it.
Yeah, that's no.
Crappies are going to be the first one to suffer.
The things though that has to be very self-governing, which is very hard to do.
Exactly.
If people are just catching fish and not handling them correctly, yeah, that's a problem. However, there are arguments to be had how forward-facing sonar can educate you if learned how to use it properly. Like if you are fishing, for example, on a break line, right? that is in 10 feet of water, but it's close to 40 feet of water. And you can't see down in some deep weeds or something where muskies could be, being caught. And you're casting this break line, the water temperature is pushing 80 degrees, and all of a sudden you see a muskie shoot up out of that 40 feet of water into the 10 feet of water, and you catch them. That's probably not a good thing, but you just learned something there. With live sonar, that would be really hard to learn if you didn't have it.
Oh, well, I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying right now, is that it educates, and all this technology, not all of it, much of the technology educates. We used to, like, at our area where we are in Southeast Alaska, I'm not kidding, if you'd have come to me 10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, you'd have come to me, I would have said, for some weird reason, we don't have lingcod where we're at. I would have said that up until a very definable moment. I would have said that until I got my hands on Navionics. Once I got my hands on Navionics, I'm like, oh shit, there's lingcod all over the place. I just never knew. I never understood the contours. We used to fish off marine charts with handfuls of fathom readings on marine chart, paper marine charts. Once I knew, oh my God, it's that down there, and there's specific ridge lines and specific pinnacle tops, and that one doesn't, this one does, that one doesn't. It's hugely educational. I've learned so much about lingcod. I'll tell you another thing. We've cleaned a lot of lingcod off a lot of hilltops.
Yeah.
It's like they go, so the all the knowledge and information is great. It's beautiful.
But you can hurt a fishery.
Well, we never scratched those fish.
Yeah.
We never ever scratched those fish.
But you could.
I know where they're at now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
just,
know the first thing I'm going to do.
like a cell.
Coming into ethics as far as your hunting, when you fly in to go hunting in Alaska and Canada, you can't hunt the same day, right?
Correct.
That's ethics. That's the same thing I look at with forward-facing sonar. If you're going to run
Ethics,
around...
I would argue ethics would be that you could but choose not to.
Yeah, but the law, isn't it the law?
Well, the law is the law.
Right.
The law is...
But it's the law for a reason.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit chicken or the egg here, but you're right. Yeah, we codify ethics. We have laws that are meant to lay down ethical understandings. Right. Like murder's not illegal because you create a lot of it's not like you create a lot of paperwork and big messes. It's illegal because we've ethically decided that fratricide is bad.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of law springs from ethics.
Right.
A lot of method to take law and bag limits and all that also spring from, how would you put it? Resource management.
Right. There's one Canadian biologist that's been on the forums that where he is. He's in Manitoba. They have a none over rule. Red River big in catfish.
Yep.
Well, you can keep them up to a certain size, but you can't keep any over that size because it's your breeders.
Yep.
And that's what he'd like to see happen to muskies, which would eliminate any possible future world record, obviously. But
I see what you're saying.
He's got a point.
That's pretty common in fisheries, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of slot limits to maintain enough fish in the fishery to keep it going. So you control by size limits, you control by bag limits. One of the lakes in Hayward there, they just went to a 5-bag panfish limit this year of any species of panfish.
5?
Can't keep more than 5 because they were slaughtering them. They can't take that kind of pressure.
Oh, they couldn't settle on something a little more compromising.
Yeah.
5?
5. Yeah.
I said, how about
I'm not a pan fisherman, so I don't care. But
you're like, I got this barrel scaler I'm real fond of, and it doesn't start spinning until there's 30 fish in there.
Yeah, might as well sell the bucket scaler now.
But
what lake was that?
it's Moose Lake.
Okay,
It's east of Hayward, 25 miles.
got it.
if you find the panfish, sometimes you find the muskies, though.
Yeah.
Chester, do you have aspirations of being a world record holder?
I mean, if I got a big fish, like for instance, Cal and I one time were out on a lake a couple years ago around here. We caught a giant fish. We were not prepared. Do I really care that I would, it probably wasn't. I don't think.
I think it was though, but go ahead.
Could have like a state record. I don't necessarily think I'd care about having my name number one, but it'd just be nice to kind of know in my heart how big that fish was, So like next time I'm out in Wisconsin, on a big fish water, I will be equipped with the right tools to actually know how big that fish is.
If someone said to me, "Would you like a state record fish?" I would say emphatically yes.
Yes. Right. Yeah. I mean,
And if they said why, I'd be like, I'm not sure, but I know that I do.
Yeah.
Catching big fish is great.
It's just a normal progression of the mind. You want more, better, bigger.
Yeah.
This is pretty funny. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and he was talking about how like trophy elk hunts are bad for recruitment. And I was like, well, why is that? He's like, have you ever run into some dude who paid $25,000 to go on this super exclusive big time elk hunt and was like, and by the way, my 6-year-old kid's going to be with us. He's going to be screwing everything up. And I was like, no, I guess I haven't.
I'm not following what he's saying.
He's like, big time hunts don't propagate hunting. Because it's like, he's like that group of folks, they're not bringing the kids along.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I don't know that I entirely agree.
I know,
but I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I
It was just the first time I'd heard it like that.
I could see something like that happen to me and being and right away in my head being like, I'm not bringing on my freaking kids.
Right.
Right.
I'm there to get something.
I wanted to. How much time are we at?
We're at time to wrap it
We're at
up.
time. I wanted to talk.
Go ahead, hit
to
Larry.
Larry about fishing more. Actually, fishing muskies.
Go ahead.
Yeah, give him the big one.
There's one that I know the answer to this, and I know what you're gonna say. But the fish of 10,000 casts. That's what everyone calls the muskie. Yeah, we could talk about fishing for days.
Have you calculated it out? How many casts?
It's not quite that many.
Yeah, I mean that would be one cast every minute for roughly 7 days straight.
And that was born
That's a lot
of
of
the
fishing.
fact that in the mid 1900s, when they were killing 100,000 muskies a year, it probably took that many. But today, if you take more than 1,000 casts, you're in the wrong spot. You're not doing something right. In fact,
If you had to catch a big muskie, are you throwing baits or are you using a live bait?
throwing baits almost exclusively.
Just because you're covering water.
Covering water, and you're going to get in front of a big fish if you're on big fish water. For instance, when I first started going out east, we fished 5 days. In July, we were there for 5 days. We'd catch 24 fish.
Muskies.
Three of us, yeah. And 6 of those would be 50 inchers.
Damn.
Go back in August for another 5 days
Like freezer fillers.
and catch 40 in 5 days, and 6 of them over 50 inches. Hotter water, the fish are more active, metabolism's high, and they're going crazy, and they're stupid fish. It's not quite that good now because we've beat the hell out of them for 28 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, more than that. But they're getting a little educated. They're harder to catch now.
Yeah.
But we still. Last year was not a normal year, but on a normal year, 3 of us in the 2 weeks, we should catch 6 or 8 50-inch fish or bigger, up to 57, 58. My buddy, who was 9 weeks in a coma with COVID, got out of COVID, got a little bit healthy. That's when the Canadian border was closed. We got word they were going to open it up at midnight. On the night of opening, we were sitting at the border station in New York, ready to go. And 2 days later, 3 days later, Saturday, Sunday, 2 days later, you got a 58.5-incher with a 14-inch head. Imagine this, a 14.5-inch head. It's just incredible. It's incredible.
Larry, two last questions for me. How many musky baits do you have?
Well, I don't have as many as I used to have, but I've probably still got several hundred.
It seems like musky guys like their baits.
Here's the thing that drives me crazy being an author. These guys that are nutcases would rather spend $100 on their 700th musky lure than to spend $35 for a book
Right.
that explains the history of their sport.
Yeah.
It makes me crazy.
I
Another
can see
question.
that.
What boat you fishing out of?
Ranger normally.
Nice.
Um,
You know, when you were talking about the fish of 10,000 casts,
yeah,
and you calculated out how long you have to do that.
yeah.
Kind of one of the highlights of my dad's life is a guy wrote an article about his still hunting method, and he put down how many steps and how long he waits. And my dad wrote a letter to the editor saying that he'd still be 40 yards from his truck at the end of the day or something like that. Highlight of his life.
Right.
Got it published.
That is hilarious. Yeah.
Out of the couple hundred lures that you have, Larry, the couple hundred baits that you have, if you had to be like, you can only take 5 across the border to Canada,
Uh-huh.
what would those 5 be?
Probably 4 of the 5 would be bucktails and 1 surface bait.
Oh, I
I
like
got
it.
a question for you. You think Chester's an idiot for using those lures?
Those are 2 of the deadliest lures on the planet.
Good for you, Chester. Good job, man.
Yeah, this thing is catching so many giant fish. The only problem I've got with this bait is if you're not properly tooled up, the fish swallow these things practically, and they'll get hooked back deep in the gills.
They want to eat that thing.
Oh, so you want to be on your game.
Their lips hit it and they think it's real.
So you got to have a tool that's called a hook pick. That'll reach in there and, like, if they get hook over the gill raker,
Yeah.
you can actually lift that hook up, push it backwards a little bit, lift it up, and pull it out without ripping the gill out of the fish.
How much money you got sunk into this lure, Chester?
That lure? I want to say, I can't quite remember.
I'd say
It was
$18.
20.
Oh, that's not bad.
18
20
to
bucks.
Can you pass
25.
that other lure down?
Yeah. That's a Suick.
This is a Suick. It was developed in the 30s by a guy named Frank Suick. He caught a muskie a day for 30 days out of Pelican Lake. The lake owners had a petition to the governor to get him banned from fishing, and
Back in the day when you'd write the governor.
The one
Hold on a minute.
This son
They
bitch is
wanted
too
him.
good.
They wanted him to stop because he was going to clean the lake out.
yeah, because you kept every one of them.
No.
That was in the keep. What years did your grandfather fish?
Man, so he died. Bear with me a minute. He died in around 84 at 80. Okay, help me out here.
So early 19.
He was not much. So when I was born, when I was a little kid, he was not that active. So I would say 50s and 60s.
Yeah, see, that's
He's a big musky
That's
fisherman.
when everybody kept them, and the 100,000 a year died, and the DNR tried like hell to make enough babies to replace them, and fishing was tough in those days.
Yeah, he was from a farm in what is now Naperville, Illinois,
Wow.
which you'd never guess you could be from a farm there.
Yeah,
There's orchards and stuff.
right.
He was from a farm there, and when they went on vacations, they would go up into Wisconsin to fish muskies,
Yep.
and that was what he did.
I mean, Wisconsin was the muskie mecca of
Yeah,
North
yeah.
America for a long time. Actually, formal muskie fishing started on the St. Lawrence River in the 1880s, in both Quebec and Ontario, New York, and then it graduated inland to Chautauqua Lake, New York, which small body water produces a lot of fish, thousands, but they stock the hell of it. They stock like 13,000 a year in there too.
Yep. You want to know something that chaps my ass, Larry?
What's that?
In Wisconsin,
Wet butt?
in Wisconsin, they've been trying to push to get pike spearing through the ice, and you know who blocks it? The muskie community. The muskie community feels like an American angler can't distinguish between a northern and a muskie. So the minute you let them spear pike through the ice, they're going to start killing muskies. A friend of mine pointed out you can count on people to tell one kind of duck from another. You can count on them to tell whether a spike antler is 3 inches or 3 1/4 inches. You can count on them to, I could go on and on and on and on and on.
But you can't tell.
But you can't count on them to tell a muskie from a pike. What do you think about that?
It's possible.
Would you support
I wouldn't support it.
Do you stand strong with pike spears?
I stand against any spearing, to be honest with you.
What about sturgeon spear?
Now, I understand, like in Michigan, you can still spear muskies in Michigan.
You can?
Only one a year now. Used to be carte blanche, but now it's only one a year.
Uh-huh.
But
you don't like any through the ice spearing?
I don't like any through the ice catching either. In fact, to give you an example, where I fish on the St. Lawrence.
Now, Larry.
Larry's
About time to wrap it up.
Where I fish on the St. Lawrence River, until this year,
Yeah.
the season for muskies didn't close until March 31st. Well, from sometimes mid-December, at least late December to the end of March, it's froze up. So not a big deal. But you could actually fish for them legitimately with rod and reel until the end of March, which means you're catching an egg-laden female. But the reason that they're cutting it back to December 19th will be the date next year is because in the last few years they've been killing so many really big muskies through the ice fishing.
Oh.
And like
So-
last
You ever
year,
caught one through the ice?
No. I've only
Pierce.
tried once, but I'm not an ice fisherman.
last year it stayed lake stayed open, so guys were fishing open water into
It
December.
opened up early this year too. It's crazy.
The one last question: how big are you on the following moon phases in musky fishing?
You know, I kept track of that for years, and I tried to be faithful to them, and I found I catch just as many in between lunar periods as I did on them.
Yeah.
So I just quit worrying about it. Now my guide, he's religious about we're getting close to a period. We got to be on a good spot, and sometimes it paid off, and sometimes it don't. Sometimes we catch big fish, and it's nowhere near a period. So he can believe if he wants. I don't believe.
Yeah. And what we're talking about there is like moon rise. As soon as the moon's coming up, moon set or moon overhead, or like.
My opinion is that because people believe that, that's when they're fishing.
Yeah.
They're not
They're
out there
trying
on
the
the off
hardest.
periods. They're not out there on the off hours. But when it's moon up time or moon set time, they're out there.
Yeah, it's like, we're getting them on chartreuse.
Yeah.
Well, what have you been using?
Chartreuse.
Chartreuse.
For a long time, black bucktail with a silver spinner blade. They're probably up until, say, 1970, there was probably more muskies caught on that one color combination, bucktail, than all the other musky baits put together. That's just because that's what everybody was throwing.
Yeah.
So guess what? That's what they get.
I got another one for you. Do you get excited about catching a tiger muskie?
You know, I for years said I'll kill and mount the first tiger muskie I ever catch. It took me quite a few years, and I caught it out of a place I didn't ever dream to catch a tiger muskie, but it's on my wall. But I love tigers. In fact, almost more than muskies. But
No way.
What's it?
Oh yeah, I love tigers.
Did you fry it up?
Yeah. But I've caught bigger ones since then and put them back.
All right, Larry, thanks for coming on, man.
I love it.
I sure hope
Anytime.
people buy your book.
Well, I don't care if they do or they don't. If they don't want to know what's going on,
Screw 'em.
It's called
Look a gift horse in the mouth.
Yeah, if you want to know what's going on,
if you want to know everything you ever want to know about past world record muskies,
Larry,
why is it asterisk in the title?
where's the? That's not an asterisk. That's an explanation of the word compendium.
Oh,
yeah, and then you go to where
Go
you
down
to
below
where
and
that is
explains
down
what a
below.
compendium is.
okay. So a compendium of musky angling history, revised, updated, and expanded. 3rd edition, Volume 1, Muskellunge World Records: The History, the Truth.
There's the key word right there.
Circa 1877 to 2006. A compendium, if you wonder what the hell that means, a compendium gathers together and presents in a concise or outlined form all the essential facts and details of a subject.
Bingo.
By Larry Ramsell.
you may want to get volume 2. There's a real important quote here at the back, on the back of books, how they put quotes from other authors or historians or scientific journals and stuff. This one at the bottom says, who's that by?
Me.
My best work yet.
Larry, I'm going to put an asterisk next to this, and there's going to be 2 asterisks next to your name, and you're going to go down to that second asterisk, and it's going to say, a man obsessed.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Larry Ramsell.
That's great.
Yeah, man.
Pretty much.
Have your girlfriend give me a ring next Memorial, man. We're going to mop up on spawning bluegills.
Okay.
I know about a hot bobber bite.
Oh, she'd love that.
You know? We just hit it pretty good.
She has boated a muskie lure, but I had to do most of the work. So.
All right, Larry, thanks for coming on. Good luck with your book.
Okay, thank you.
And if I catch a world record muskie while you're still on Earth, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut.
Or call me before you speak.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Larry.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
I love fishing lures. I love to cast them while I'm drinking a Coors, or while on the rocks I'm drinking a Doors. Clever little mechanical works of art. I love fishing lures. Got a whole tackle box of them. Wouldn't want any fewer. I bet I'm a better fisherman than you are. When I'm at the sporting goods store, I love loading up my cart. Some are striped, some are polka dotted. Big treble hook, sometimes your line gets knotted. Some dive deep, some skitter on top of the water. Look at that big bass, I'm glad that I caught her. Some are one piece, some are articulated. Some are simple, some are complicated. Some of them spin, some of them rattle. All kind of exotic colors as your boat you paddle. I love fishing lures. Without them in my life, I would be poor. Some are so effective, I think I could catch fish in a sewer. Lots of well-designed little parts. Oh, I love fishing lures. I'm thinking of joining that professional bass fishing tour. Some are 100-year-old classics, others are newer. I love the way they dive and dart. Some are chrome-plated, others are spotted. You think I'm missing a lure? I've probably got it. Some go back and forth like a teeter-totter. My dog brings me good luck, I'm glad I brought her. Some are pretty light, others are weighted. I want to keep casting fishing lures unabated. Fish are lurking in the shadows. Gotta lure them out before my mind gets addled.